So I find it interesting that one of the first details that the Gospels record during Jesus' crucifixion is how the Jewish leaders mocked him. But before we get into how they mocked him, let us just add a bit of context to this story. Let's rewind it back a bit to one day when Jesus decides to enter a synagogue on the day of the Sabbath, the day of rest. Now he's becoming known for working miracles and healing people. And so the Jewish leaders are gathered in the synagogue, waiting to catch him healing somebody on the Sabbath, the day of rest, because according to their interpretation of the law, you don't heal on the Sabbath. You don't work miracles on the day of rest. And so they're all gathered in here to watch him, to see if they could catch him. And Jesus, knowing their hearts, sees a man with a withered hand, a deformed hand. And he tells the man with the withered hand, "Come here." The guy with the deformed hand comes to the center of the room. So you already know everybody's like, oh boy, here we go. And Jesus says to the crowd, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" Do you see what Jesus is doing here? He's pointing out the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. He's showing them, oh, you're here trying to call me out for being unlawful when all I'm trying to do is restore this man, trying to make him whole. Yet you're out here trying to kill me. I'm here trying to do good. You're here trying to do evil. I'm here trying to save. You're here trying to destroy my life. So who's really being the unlawful one? So it's a straightforward question with a straightforward answer, and yet, what's the religious leader's response to his question? But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Now that we have some context, we can get to my point. So let's fast forward back to the crucifixion scene. Jesus is hanging on the cross. You have the Jewish leaders there mocking him, saying he saved others, yet he cannot save himself. Now we may just read that and not think much of it because we know this is the Alpha, the Omega, right? This is God. So their mockery is silly. But I feel like this passage warrants more reflection than that. I do believe that there's an element of truth to what the Jewish leaders are saying, even though they may not know it, even though they may be speaking straight out of ignorance. Now, before you burn me at the stake, I'm not saying that it's not possible for Jesus to come down from the cross. Obviously, if he wanted to come down from that cross, he could come down from that cross, right? What I am saying, though, is that due to his unfathomable love, due to his unwavering desire to save us and to do the Father's will, coming down from that cross was not an option. You may ask yourself, what is Jesus trying to save us from? Remember, God created us for himself. Our souls desire nothing less than infinite goodness, truth, and beauty, which is what God is. That's who he is. And so you trying to fulfill your heart's desires with all this worldly stuff, it's just going to end up coming short. Because nothing less than God will fulfill your heart. St. Augustine said it best over 1,500 years ago. He said, God has created us for himself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in him. So we're created for God, but the problem is we have a sinful nature. People don't like that word. People don't like the word sin. But it's a fact we have an inherent inclination towards sin. And so we fail to live the life that God has called us to live day in and day out. Not that we have, not that our nature is 100% evil. Rather that there is something corrupt about our nature. And so just think about how many times you failed to love your parents as you should, to love your siblings as you should, to love your friends, your coworkers, your enemies. Like, we're called to love our enemies, by the way. But think about all the times you fail to live the life that God has called us to live. All right, let's connect both ideas now. We are created for God, who is pure goodness, truth, and beauty, who is justice himself. Our hearts desire that. Yet, we are corrupt. We are unjust. We are hateful, selfish, prideful, lustful, greedy. Keep going. We fail again to live the life God has called us to live. And so, how can the unjust be reconciled to the just? How can the impure be reconciled to the pure? And so now we're in this hopeless state that though our souls are eternally directed towards God, there is this barrier between us that we call sin. We have that sinful nature that stands between us and God. And so we're in this hopeless state. The good news is that God is love. Love isn't something that God merely does. No, according to the first letter of John, love is who God is. His very nature is to love. And so this God who is love sees us in this hopeless state, sees us desiring, yearning for him, yearning to be reconciled with him, but unable to save ourselves because of our sinful nature. That God, he doesn't merely say he loves us, he shows it. And what's the greatest expression of love? Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John, chapter 15. He says that greater love has no man than this, that a man laid down his life for his friends. You see, somebody has to fit the bill. Somebody has to pay for the injustices that you and I have committed. Somebody has to make straight the paths that we've made crooked. And so what's God's answer to this dilemma, to our dilemma? It is Christ. And Christ, who is God, and God who is love, when he loves all the way. He is the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays his life down for the sheep. Dr. Peter Crave, he sums up Christ's love for us quite beautifully. He says, the love Christ brings is the love that God is. And God does not need anything. God is sheer gift. That's why Jesus came, and why he died, and why he shed so much blood. He didn't have to. One drop would have saved the world. We were already saved at his circumcision. So why did he give 12 quarts? Because he had 12 quarts to give. With all that in mind, let's go back to the scene of the crucifixion. The Jewish leaders are mocking Jesus, saying he saved others, yet he cannot save himself. Little do they know that this tremendous lover is laying his life down for his beloved. It is because he is saving us that he cannot save himself. Jesus, while hanging on the cross, says, I thirst. Indeed, he thirsts for our hearts and for our love. He thirsts for the moment that nothing stands between him and his beloved, between him and his bride, the church. It is for that very moment that he came to save us. And it is because of that moment that saving himself is not an option. This is why I find scripture fascinating, the paradox of it all. You remember back in the synagogue, Jesus asked the religious leaders, is it lawful to do good or to do harm? To save or to kill? Because Jesus knows their motives. He knows they're out to destroy him, but he utilizes that. Their desire to do him harm, he used that to do us good. Their desire to kill Jesus, Jesus used that to save us. So never forget that God's ways are way above our ways. And just as Jesus says to the man with the withered hand, come to me in order to be made whole, in order to be restored. He says to all of us, come to me in order to be restored, in order to be made whole, in order to be saved. Thank you for watching, and God bless.